came up off the asphalt in waves, bending the air until everything beyond 20 feet looked like it was underwater. Daniel Cross had spent enough years in the Arizona desert to know that kind of heat, but the heat wasn't what made him stop his truck at the chain-link gate of the county impound yard 15 miles outside Yuma. It was the sound. Dogs barking. Not the aggressive, territorial barking of animals defending space, but something else entirely. It was the sound of confusion, of distress, of warriors who'd been trained never to show fear, trying desperately not to break. Cross killed the engine and sat there for a moment, his jaw working, his eyes fixed on the rows of steel cages visible through the fence. He'd gotten the anonymous call 3 hours ago, a voice he didn't recognize, probably someone from the department who didn't want their name attached to what they were about to say. "They're auctioning off the K9s today. Thought you should know." He'd driven here knowing what he'd find. Somehow that made it worse. The impound yard was cracked concrete, rusted fencing, and a metal-roofed shelter that provided about as much shade as a bedsheet. The cages were arranged in 2 long rows, and inside them sat the kind of dogs Cross had worked alongside for 15 years before his transfer to patrol supervision. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, every one of them a working canine, retired from active duty. Except they didn't look retired. They looked abandoned. Their coats were clean enough, but their eyes told a different story. Some were pacing obsessively. Others sat perfectly still, back straight, ears tracking every sound, waiting for commands that weren't coming. A few had pressed themselves into the far corners of their cages, heads down, the light gone out of them entirely. Cross had seen that look before, in soldiers coming back from deployments that had broken something inside them, in cops who'd worked one too many cases involving kids. Civilians were scattered around the yard, examining the dogs like they were shopping for used cars. A man in pressed khakis was discussing bloodlines with someone taking notes. 2 contractors were evaluating which dogs still had enough drive for private security work. A woman was checking teeth and bone structure, calculating profit margins. Nobody was asking about service records. Nobody was asking what these dogs had done, where they'd served, who they'd protected. Nobody was asking about the handlers who'd loved them. Cross moved between the cages slowly. The dogs reacted immediately, ears swiveling, bodies shifting toward the front of the cages, low whines building in their throats. Not aggression, recognition. One Malinois started shaking the moment Cross walked past, not from fear, from recognition. The dog knew the uniform, knew the walk, knew the bearing of someone who'd worked with K9s.
Cross stopped in front of that cage. The dog's tag was still there. K9 Viper, 7 years old, narcotics detection. Cross remembered him. Remembered his handler, too, Detective Sarah Chen, who'd transferred to Oregon, who'd cried when she turned Viper over, made them promise he'd be taken care of. This wasn't what she'd meant. A voice crackled over a PA system. "Folks, we'll be starting the auction in about 10 minutes. Opening bids begin at $200 per animal. All sales are final, no medical histories provided. Any animals that don't sell will be processed according to standard protocols." Processed, the bureaucratic euphemism for killing. Cross continued down the row, cataloging each canine, matching faces to memories. There was Kodiak, bomb detection, handler killed in a training accident. There was Ghost, patrol and apprehension, handler retired on disability after a shooting. And then he reached the last cage in the second row, and his whole world stopped. The Belgian Malinois inside was darker than most, his coat almost black in places. His left ear had a piece missing, an old injury. His shoulder bore a long scar, mostly hidden by fur, but visible if you knew where to look. K9 Havoc. Aaron Miles's dog, his partner's dog, his best friend's dog. The dog who'd been there the night Aaron died. Cross had been to enough funerals to know how they worked. The folded flag, the 3-volley salute, the bagpipes playing Amazing Grace while grown men cried and pretended they weren't. Aaron's funeral had been all of that, with 200 cops in dress uniforms standing in the rain. But what Cross remembered most was standing at the graveside after everyone else had left, just him and Aaron's widow, Michelle, and their 2 kids, and Havoc lying on the fresh dirt like he was waiting for Aaron to come back. "He doesn't understand," Michelle had said, her voice broken. "He keeps looking for him." Cross had promised her then that he'd make sure Havoc was taken care of, that when the dog retired, he'd go somewhere good, somewhere safe. He'd broken that promise, or the system had broken it for him. Havoc was sitting at perfect attention inside his cage, his amber eyes fixed on Cross with an intelligence that sometimes scared people who weren't used to working dogs. And Havoc remembered him. Cross saw it in the way the dog's ears came forward, in the slight tilt of his head, in the way his whole body tensed, not with fear, but with hope. "Hey, brother," Cross whispered. "Yeah, it's me." Havoc stood, walked to the front of the cage, pressed his nose between the bars and exhaled hard, the way he used to do when Aaron came back from a long shift. Cross reached out, let Havoc smell his hand, and felt the dog's tail move. Just once. Just enough.
Footsteps on gravel. Cross turned to find a uniformed officer approaching. "Sir, if you're here for the auction, you'll need to register." "I'm not here for the auction," Cross said. "I'm here to find out why these dogs are being sold in the first place." The officer's expression didn't change. "Departmental reorganization. These dogs have been evaluated and cleared for retirement." "Evaluated by who?" "County Veterinary Services." "And where are those evaluations?" "That information isn't available to the public." Cross turned fully to face the younger officer. "I'm not the public. I'm Senior Patrol Officer Daniel Cross, 23 years on the job, former K9 handler, and I'm asking to see the documentation that justifies retiring 17 working dogs in a single month." "Sir, you don't have authorization. If you're not participating, I need to ask you to leave." "On whose authority?" "Mine." A new voice, older, harder. A man in a sheriff's department polo walked over. "Captain Raymond Holder, Administrative Services, and you're out of line, Cross." Cross had met Holder twice before, the kind of administrator who saw everything in spreadsheets, who measured success in cost savings. "These dogs passed their evaluations," Cross said evenly. "I've seen the reports from 6 months ago. Every one of them was cleared for continued service." "Evaluations change. Circumstances change." "What circumstances?" Holder's eyes went flat. "That's not your concern." "It is when I'm looking at K9s who saved officers' lives being sold off like surplus equipment. These are animals, Cross. They've served a purpose. Now they're being rehomed." "Rehomed." Cross looked back at the cages. "Is that what we're calling it?" "What would you call it?" "Abandonment." The PA system crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to begin. First lot is K9 designation Victor 7, Belgian Malinois, age 8, certified in narcotics detection. Opening bid is $200. A hand went up, then another. Cross watched the bidding, feeling something sick twist in his stomach. These people didn't want partners, they wanted tools. One by one, the dogs were auctioned. Some sold quickly, others took longer. A few didn't sell at all, and Cross saw the auctioneer make a mark on his clipboard, cataloging which animals would need to be processed. When they got to Kodiak, the big German shepherd who'd worked bomb detection for 8 years, something broke. The moment the auctioneer started describing him, Kodiak's legs gave out.
He collapsed against the side of the cage, shaking violently, his eyes wide and white-rimmed, his breathing coming in rapid gasps. It wasn't disobedience, it wasn't aggression, it was a full panic attack happening right there in front of everyone. The crowd went silent. Cross moved. He walked straight to Kodiak's cage and dropped to one knee. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, it's okay. You're okay." Kodiak's eyes found him. The shaking didn't stop, but it lessened. "I need you to breathe, buddy. Just breathe. I know it's scary, but I've got you. You hear me? I've got you." Holder's voice cut through. "Cross, step away from the cage." Cross ignored him. He kept his eyes on Kodiak, kept his voice steady. "That's it. Good boy." "Cross, I'm ordering you." "These dogs are traumatized." Cross stood, turning to face the crowd. "You're looking at PTSD. These aren't dogs who failed evaluations. These are dogs who gave everything they had, and now they're being thrown away because someone decided they were inconvenient." "That's enough," Holder snapped. "No, it's not nearly enough." Cross pointed at Kodiak. "That dog survived an IED blast that killed his handler, and now he's having a panic attack because he doesn't understand why he's in a cage, why no one's coming for him." The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. "Who authorized these retirements? Because every one of these dogs was cleared for service 3 months ago. So what changed?" Holder's face went red. "You're done here, Cross. Leave now or I'll have you removed. Remove me then, but I'm not leaving without answers." The standoff held for 3 long seconds, and then Cross heard it, tires on gravel, moving fast. 2 black SUVs rolled into the yard, government plates, tinted windows. They parked with precision, and Cross felt his pulse quicken. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, dark suit, badge clipped to her belt. Special Agent Rebecca Holt, Department of Justice, Internal Affairs Division. Her voice carried authority that made Holder look like a rookie. "This auction is suspended immediately, pending federal investigation into corruption, fraud, and animal welfare violations." Holder went pale. "You can't." "I can and am." Holt produced a document folder. "We've been investigating irregularities in your K9 program for 6 months, Captain Holder. Forced retirements of evaluated animals, falsified veterinary reports, financial incentives from a private security contractor named Redstone Solutions, and a systematic plan to euthanize any dogs that didn't sell." She turned to the crowd. "Anyone who's paid money today will receive a full refund. This auction is illegal. These animals are being seized as evidence."
Cross felt vindication. 6 months ago, he'd filed a report questioning the retirements. He'd been told to drop it. He'd filed it anyway, sent it to every oversight agency he could find. Apparently, someone had been listening. Holt walked over to him. "Officer Cross, your report started this investigation. Based on your experience and your documented relationship with these animals, I'm prepared to recommend that you be granted emergency custodial authority. Are you willing to provide care for these dogs?" Cross looked at the cages, at 17 dogs who'd served with honor, who'd been betrayed, at Havoc, who'd lost his handler and was being asked to trust again. "Yes, ma'am," Cross said. "I can do that." "Good." Holt signaled to her team. "Open the cages." Federal agents moved through the yard, unlocking cages one by one. The dogs emerged cautiously, but they didn't scatter. They moved toward Cross. Viper came first, pressing against Cross's leg. Then Kodiak, still shaking but calmer. Then Ghost and Titan and Ranger and all the others, forming a loose perimeter around him. All except Havoc. Havoc stood at the entrance to his open cage, perfectly still, watching Cross. Cross understood. Trust wasn't automatic when it had been shattered. He walked over slowly and knelt down in front of the cage. "I know you're scared," Cross said quietly. "I know you lost someone you loved. Aaron was my best friend. He was my brother, and when I lost him, I lost part of myself, too." Havoc's ears came forward. "I made him a promise," Cross continued, "that if anything ever happened to him, I had to look after you. He said you deserved better than the system would give you."
Cross reached into his pocket and pulled out something he carried every day for 2 years, a chain, and attached to it a K9 badge. Detective Aaron Miles's K9 badge, the one Michelle had pressed into Cross's hand at the wake. When Havoc retires, give this to him. Let him know Aaron never forgot him. Cross held out the badge, letting Havoc see it, smell it, remember it. The dog's entire body went rigid, his ears flattened in recognition, and then Havoc moved. He walked out of the cage and sat directly in front of Cross, the way he'd been trained to sit for his handler. Cross's hands shook as he attached the badge to Havoc's collar. "You're not forgotten," he whispered. "You never were, and you're not alone, not anymore." Havoc looked at him for a long moment, and then he leaned forward and rested his head against Cross's shoulder, the way he used to do with Aaron. Not waiting for orders, not performing, just trusting. Cross wrapped his arms around the dog and held on. "I've got you. I've got all of you, and I'm not letting go."
The investigation that followed was thorough. Captain Holder and 3 other officials were charged with corruption and fraud. Redstone Solutions lost their contracts and faced prosecution. The veterinarian who'd falsified reports lost his license. And Cross was granted permanent custody of all 17 K9s, with full departmental funding and support from veteran and animal welfare organizations. He bought 27 acres of scrubland outside Yuma. He built kennels with climate control and soft bedding. He hired a trauma veterinarian and a K9 behavioral specialist who'd worked with military dogs. And slowly, the dogs began to recover. Kodiak learned to sleep without panic attacks. Viper regained his confidence. Ghost resumed his patrol habits, walking the property perimeter every evening. And Cross let him because it gave the dog peace. And Havoc slept on Cross's porch every night, Detective Aaron Miles's badge gleaming in the moonlight, a reminder of promises kept. Cross never forgot what he'd learned in that impound yard. Loyalty wasn't a transaction that ended when service did. Sacrifice didn't come with an expiration date. And heroes didn't stop being heroes just because the job was over or because the system had failed them. These dogs had run into danger when everyone else ran out. They'd taken bullets meant for their handlers. They'd worked until their bodies broke and their minds scarred, and they'd done it with a devotion most people would never understand. They'd given everything, and they deserved everything in return. On quiet evenings, Cross would sit on his porch with Havoc beside him and watch the other dogs in the yard. Some would be playing, others would be resting. A few would be running the fence line, still alert, still ready, still warriors even in retirement. And Cross would think about Aaron Miles and all the other handlers who'd given their lives in service. He'd think about the bond between human and canine that went beyond training, beyond duty, beyond words. These dogs had saved lives. Now Cross had saved theirs. That was the deal. That was the covenant between those who serve and those who remember. That was what loyalty really meant. Not just what we ask of those who protect us, but what we owe them when the fighting is done and the world moves on and everyone else forgets. If this story reminded you what honor truly means, if it made you think about the warriors who serve on 4 legs and the humans who stand beside them, then hit because the men and women who protect us and the canine partners who fight alongside them deserve more than our thanks. They deserve our memory. They deserve our action. They deserve to know that when they give everything for us, we won't turn away when it's our turn to give something back. Loyalty isn't just a word, it's a promise we make to those who can't speak for themselves. And it's a promise